It's time for our weekly arts and culture segment. Joining me in the studio is our culture correspondent, Song Yoo-jin. Good to see you, Yoo-jin.
Great to be back, Jung-min.
So last time you were here with a good way to start of the new year with exciting winter stories. So what do you have for us today?
Well, I definitely did. And I also want to start off this week by asking you a question. So have you heard of the term Korean diaspora?
I think I have, but do tell us more about some of our viewers who may not be unfamiliar with this term.
Well, diaspora, it's actually not a word that we use in our everyday lives. So to elaborate, diaspora is a term used to describe people of one country dispersed across the world. And this word originally referred to scattered Jewish colonies or Jews living outside Palestine or modern Israel. But over the years, it has evolved to describe other groups of people living away from their homeland. So in other words, cross-border migration. And there's a special reason why I brought up this topic of Korean diaspora for this week. And that's the reason. The reason is because today is the 120th anniversary of Korean immigration. And so to really guide our viewers through this history, I visited the very place where it all started. January 13th, 1903. The RMS Gaelic arrives in Honolulu, Hawaii at dawn. The first immigration ship carrying Koreans. How and why did they make that journey? So this is where it all started, Incheon Port, also known as Jaemulpo Port, back in the early 1900s. And this was actually the country's largest port where more than half of its trade took place. But during this time, Koreans suffer from great political turmoil and also food shortages. And so from here, looking to support their families and seeking for a better life, 121 Korean immigrants boarded the Genkai Maru on December 22nd, 1902, and set sail for Hawaii. The ship arrived in Nagasaki, Japan 2 days later. There, only 102 who passed physical examinations got on board the Gaelic. After arriving in Hawaii, most worked at sugar plantations for over 10 hours a day, providing relatively cheap labor. Following the first voyage, some 7,400 Koreans moved to the U.S. over the next 2 years. But this was only the start.
Koreans started new lives as independence activists in China, farm workers in Mexico, theatre actors in Russia, miners and nurses in Germany. Their destinations diversified, especially after the Emigration Act in 1962.
Currently, there are more than 7.3 million overseas Koreans across 193 countries. And now there are those who are working to continue this legacy. One is film director Lee Jin-young.
After living here for several years, I got to learn about this amazing Korean immigrant history, which was so very inspiring and very moving at the same time. I wanted my daughter and their friends to know how much love they have received, not just from their parents, but from ancestors.
There's also Korean-American Julia Ryu, who rose to stardom after her Korean folktale-based musical Simcheong went viral online.
I have so much more of an appreciation of the really hard work and difficult times that our grandparents went through in order to give their children and their grandchildren a better life, and I hope to be able to pass on that legacy.
Though spread across the globe, one thing will never change. We're all Koreans by heart.
Well, Yoo-jin, it was very meaningful and interesting. We're definitely continuing to see more overseas Koreans doing their best in what they do.
Well, you're definitely right. And I want to say that culture is not the only sector that we're seeing these overseas Koreans excelling and showing their presence known. And that's because especially last year was worth noting, particularly in the political field, all 4 Korean Americans who ran for Congress won their respective races in the U.S. midterm elections. We also saw a Korean American politician being elected to statewide office in the U.S. For the first time in history, Lieutenant Governor of Hawaii, Sylvia Chan Sang-luk. And as a country that's become a new home to the largest number of Korean immigrants and also where this history started, the U.S. has been celebrating January 13th actually as Korean American Day from 2005 to really recognize the contributions made by Korean Americans. So today, marking the occasion, U.S. President Joe Biden released a statement saying that, quote, Koreans have played a critical role both domestically and internationally as we live in a more interconnected global world. And on Friday local time in Hawaii, a special ceremony will take place in Honolulu at the first overseas Korean church, and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol will send his congratulatory remarks as well.
All right, Yoo-jin, that was a very nice and great report. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.